back to the channel. Today I'm taking you on a tour of all of my houseplants. Ever since Wyatt and I moved into this house last May, I've been collecting basically like 1 or 2 plants every month. I never really had it as a hobby before that, but I just decided one day that I wanted to try it out with like 1 or 2 plants. And then those went super well, and then I got more, and those went well, and then it just kind of kept going from there. Starting with the very first plant I ever bought, that is this snake plant right here. I bought it honestly specifically because the lady at the store told me this is one of the easiest plants you could ever buy. It's really easy to care for. It is a type of succulent, and yeah, it started in a lot smaller pot than this, and I ended up having to transplant it a couple times because it went so well. This little shoot here is totally brand new, and so is this big tall leaf back here. Those both grew since I got the plant. And of course, I painted the pot myself. Next, I have this plant, which is like a new addition to the family. It's also in a pot that I painted, and this is called an Alocasia Poly, or African mask plant. It's not actually from Africa, it's just called African mask because the leaves kind of look like those wooden African masks that you see. And this is really cool. I've been like sort of lusting after this plant for a really long time, and it was my first plant I wanted to buy when all of the stores reopened again here in Ontario. They closed right after Christmas and just opened recently, but luckily where Wyatt's brother lives, because he doesn't live in the same town as us, their plant stores opened first. And him and his girlfriend knew I've been dying for one of these. So when they went to their plant store and saw it, they got one for me, which is super cool of them. So that is like one of the most cool striking plants. This guy though is like really in need of humidity, and it's really dry in our front hall because I have a space heater on for these plants because the heat basically doesn't work in the front hall. So what I've been doing is just bringing it to the bathroom with us whenever one of us is in the shower so we can get a little dose of humidity. Next up is my peace lily, and it actually has just bloomed for the very first time. Like, I guess it opened this past weekend, maybe a couple of days ago. When I first bought it, I just bought it because I thought it was a cool green leafy plant, and it was the only plant I owned for a super long time that I didn't know what it was. And then eventually I found some pictures online of a peace lily without the lilies, and I realized that that's what it was. And probably a month ago now, I noticed that one of its little shoots was sort of balled up and looked like a lighter green. And I finally realized at that point that like, oh my god, it's growing a flower. So now it has this one here, this one over here, and a couple smaller ones around the base. So it's really exciting. It blooms in springtime, and now it's March in Canada, so it's not actually like spring yet, but I think because the days are getting longer, that's what sort of like clued it in to start blooming. Here's like the one amazing flower on this plant. It's sort of weird looking too. It's like an interesting shape and has like this little like nubbly guy, or nibbly, I don't even know what you'd call that, like little nubs on it on the inside, which is really cool. Over here, I have my little cluster of plants that all need bright, direct sunlight. This one singular window in our front hall is the best window in the whole entire house for plants. So that's why I have them all sort of like lined up like this. And this white piece of wood, this board thing, is not actually something that we did ourselves. It just was like this when we moved into the house, and it had a sheet of plexiglass in it, so I have no idea what the heck it was possibly for, but when I realized I could put plants here and then plants along this too, I got super excited because I was like, oh my gosh, this doubles the amount of highlight plants that I can have in this front hall. Let's start with this one. This one is of course a cactus. It's a moon cactus, and this little weird guy on the top is technically sort of like a parasite in a way. It doesn't support itself. The green stalk of the plant sort of gives nutrients and water to itself and to this thing on the top. So the thing on the top is basically just useless and leaches off the green stem. So eventually the thing on the top or the whole entire plant will start to die, and the way to save it is by like actually just beheading it and cutting this thing off. And then the green stem itself will continue to live, and it could possibly grow little arms like you see on like cactuses in cartoons, and have little arms sticking up like this from it once you remove the pink thing. Wyatt is always convinced that it's time for us to cut its head off, but it still looks totally healthy and strong to me, so I'm leaving it on as long as I can essentially. Next up is the shy plant, or sensitive plant, and this one's really cool and different, and also like the neediest of all the plants that we own. It's really unique because if you touch its leaves, it closes up like that. So it's really fun, it's really different. Whenever people come over, Wyatt loves to sort of like demo this to them. But obviously we try not to do it too much because it takes a ton of energy for the plant to do this. And like I said, it's basically on life support around the clock. It is so demanding. It has to be fertilized like every couple of weeks. It needs constant watering. It has to have like the perfect light conditions to be able to survive. So it almost died at one point when we first got it because I didn't really realize just how much work it was going to be to keep alive. And now that we've sort of figured it out, he's sort of stabilized and has been pretty much thriving ever since we started fertilizing him. Next up is one of my absolute favorite plants, and also a really new one. I got this at the same time as the African mask plant, also from Wyatt's brother. And this is just, you know, your classic Venus flytrap. It's really cool. The traps on it are quite big. I think this is pretty much like the biggest size it will will grow to. I don't think they get too much bigger than this. I had one before and the traps were like a fifth of the size of these traps, and all the new ones, like new arms would grow, but they wouldn't have traps on the end. So it got pretty jacked up, but this one looks a lot better and healthier. I think the last one was sort of ruined by the growers. Like whoever grew it didn't give it enough nutrition or light or something like that, and the traps just basically were useless. That's why it started growing new arms that didn't have them. But this guy's doing great, and we actually fed it the other day. Like I mentioned, it's still basically winter in Canada, so we can't put it outside to catch flies right now, but I read online that you can feed it mealworms, like people will give to their lizards, those weird little dried worms that are about this long. And so I bought a canister of them, I rehydrated the worm, I stuck it into this trap right here and used a little toothpick because it's got tiny hairs inside its traps that when they're bristled against, it knows to close the trap and start digesting the food. And obviously because the worm I gave it wasn't alive, I had to stimulate the hairs on the inside of the trap myself. So yeah, I don't know, I can actually still see the outline of the worm in there, which is like kind of weird and gross, but awesome at the same time. So I don't know, I'm basically just waiting to see how long it takes to digest that worm, and when it's gone, I'll give it another one. So that's that. And next up is a succulent. I call this guy just green spiky guy all the time, but it technically is a Haworthia, aka a zebra plant, I'm pretty sure. And this guy started in a super tiny pot. It started in a pot the size of the one that this Venus flytrap is in when I first brought it home, and it just grew like crazy. And now it's gigantic. It's basically filled up this whole entire pot that I have it in now, and it's growing new like offshoots. I don't know how well you can tell on camera, but essentially it's growing new bundles, and those bundles actually could be removed and replanted to new plants and sort of like segment it off and then just start being their own plant at that point. I might look into doing that eventually because they kind of reach their max size around this size, I think. The only way to sort of keep it going would be to like cut pieces off and make new plants and maybe even give them to people. So I'm not sure about that, but I love the way that it looks. This is one of my favorite looking plants. It's just so cool. It kind of looks like an aloe, but the leaves or spikes, I guess, won't get nearly as big as an aloe plant would. Next up is yet another snake plant, except this one is a different variety of snake plant, and it's really weird. It came with these guys in the center that were all perfectly cylindrical, but all of the new growth is like an open leaf like this. And I actually read online that none of the new growth will be perfectly cylindrical like the original ones that were there. And I forget the reason for that, but it kind of sucks because I thought that it would just start growing up in spikes like the way it was when I got it. But either way, it still does look really cool. I think snake plants are really striking, and they're actually a plant that I like gift to everybody that I know because I love plants so much, and they're like the easiest plant to take care of and the hardest to kill. So I like to give them as gifts to people so that hopefully it'll be like the little like first taste, little toe dipped into the water of plant owning. Next up is one of my favorite plants. I love this thing. It brings me so much joy to look at. It's called a pickle plant because obviously its little leaves, you could say, I guess, look like pickles. And they're super soft and smushy, and I just love to sit out here and like touch them because they're so cute. This is again a type of succulent, and they basically get like super long like this, almost viney. And of course I painted this guy's little pot too. Next up is another weird one, and one that I don't really know all that much about. I saw this at the plant store one day when I went to get like dirt, and I saw it and I didn't buy it because I don't like to buy things impulsively because we already have so many plants, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I went back the next day and I bought one, and it said it was called silver sands. I'd never seen anything like this before, and I do believe it's somewhat related to lavender. Basically, I think most people actually grow it outside in their gardens because most of the information I found on it wasn't on keeping it as a house plant, but actually keeping it outside in a garden. So I don't know, I've just been doing my best. I know it needs to be kept moist, and it doesn't look, it looks like it's a dead plant, but it actually is just white. And I don't know that it's changed shape or grown since we've had it, but it definitely isn't dying either. Like it never drops its little leaves, whatever you call this, I don't know. It's never dropping any of its foliage, and it kind of just stays the same. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on with this one. This one's the one that I know the least about, but it does look really cool. Next up is Wyatt's trees, because Wyatt loves little trees. This one is, of course, I feel like pretty recognizable. It's a money tree. Its little trunks are braided, and it's supposed to bring you good luck. And it's tied with a little gold twist tie because I believe in, I think, Chinese culture, it's good luck to tie it with red or gold. Specifically, if you tie with another color, it's not good luck. You actually have to keep braiding it. It won't just stay in a braid. So as it gets bigger, you have to continually braid the trunks as they go. And then they solidify into like bark after a long period of time. So like they start pliable up here, and then the bottom is basically unmovable. So as long as you continually braid it over, I guess, years, it'll eventually create a super cool looking tall braided trunk. And this thing can get really big. Like it can get, I believe, like 6 feet tall, but up to like, I think 10, 15, 20 feet tall in nature. Not in a house, but where they actually naturally grow. And the craziest part about this plant is that when we brought it home, all of its little leaves had 5 leaves. So it was like one stem with 5 leaves. And now all the new ones that have grown have 6. So this guy right here is new, it has 6 leaves. This one's new, it has 6 leaves. This one over here. So I don't know what the heck happened. That seems like almost like superstitious. Like I feel like it like means something, but I don't know, it's weird and also really cool. Our second little tree is this guy in a Buddha head, because we love Buddha. And it's called a Ming Aurelia. And normally they'd be a lot more bushy than this, like a lot more foliage, but this guy is very, very young. You can see starting to grow more over here. I basically expect this and all the rest of the plants to sort of take off and start growing a lot as soon as spring and summer actually comes here, because that is of course plant growing season. All of these guys have been holding kind of steady throughout the winter, including this one, but I can't wait to see it get more bushy and eventually transplant it to bigger and bigger pots, because of course it is a tree, so it can get bigger. Next up is this guy. And this guy is like such a weird plant. He's so difficult and it changes appearance all the time. At first it was growing super tall and leggy and looked really ugly and was flopping over, and so I keep having to trim it and like cut it down in certain areas to get it to be more bush-like, because I think it looks a lot nicer as a bush. It is of course just a polka dot plant. The newest leaves up on top here are like the best example of what it should look like, with hot pink spots. The leaves that are a little older and lower down kind of get more washed out from the sun. And this guy also is one of the ones that is sort of in need of humidity. Sometimes the older leaves on the bottom will sort of crinkle up and get brown and crunchy. But yeah, I don't know, this thing is definitely interesting. It grows fast, it changes its appearance all the time. It's just, I don't know, it's kind of weird. It just like doesn't look right, I feel like. But I love it nonetheless. This is probably, I think, the second plant I bought. So we've had it for a really long time, coming up on a year now. And it's basically every month just looked different. So I don't know, we'll see what happens to it in the summer. Hopefully it continues to have nice little hot pink spots on it. The last one in this whole entire front hall is this thing, which doesn't look all that exciting, but it's a calancho, which is again a type of succulent. And whenever you see these in the store, especially around say like Valentine's Day, they have flowers on them. So it's a flowering succulent and it has the flowers for quite a long time. I think like a month or months it will keep its flowers, but then eventually they all die off. And I've been having a really hard time getting it to bloom again. It needs very specific amounts of light and temperature to make it bloom. And supposedly you can actually almost force it to bloom because it will naturally bloom in the winter. And what you have to do is actually keep it in darkness for a lot of the time and stop watering it altogether. And apparently that's what can force it to bloom. I haven't really put in that much effort to it. Since its flowers died, it started growing all these new little baby leaves where the flowers were. And so I figure it's still, you know, like a healthy, thriving, cute little succulent. So it's not the end of the world if it gets flowers again or not. I think some people can manage to make them bloom again in their houses. It just takes a little bit of effort. So that's pretty much all the front hall plants. I think there's what, like 12, 13, 14 of them, something like that. This is the only area in the whole entire house that we keep plants, but oh, there's one thing we forgot to talk about out here. My little baby nursery. This is the one thing that I forgot to talk about. This is, it looks like nothing, but this is my little baby nursery where I'm growing a succulent called lithops, or living stones. They look super crazy when they're fully grown. I'll put an image on the screen for you. They look completely alien, basically. They kind of look like a brain, they kind of look like a rock, which is why they're called living stones. They're a little bit more rare as far as succulents go and a little harder to find. So actually, I got the seeds as a gift from Wyatt's brother and his girlfriend because, as you've probably noticed, they're pretty into plants too. So for my birthday last month, they gifted me some seeds to grow these exotic succulents. And so far, I've had a whole bunch of them sprout. They're very minuscule and hard to see right now. The seeds themselves were so tiny. They were like less than a grain of sand each, basically. It was like almost impossible to not lose them. Like if you breathe, if you like took one breath a little too much, all your seeds would be gone. So that was like the hardest part of planting these little guys. And so far, yeah, I think 6 out of 10, there's 12 egg carton spots, of course, but there's actually only 10 seeds. And I think about 6 of them have sprouted so far. Can you see it? Oh, you can see him. Oh, he's so little. Oh, it's so tiny and cute. Even if they're gonna be like pink or blue or something like that, all the little seedlings start out green at first. So I won't know for quite a while what color they're all gonna be. So that's what's going on with that. I've been misting this little egg tray every single day. And depending on how this goes, I think I might buy some other sort of exotic succulents to try to grow. And if a lot of them work out, then I can also just like gift them to people, which is really fun. So, okay. For realsies this time, that is everything that's in the front hall. That is every real plant in the house in the front hall, except my crazy little Frankenstein science experiment out here. So I've talked about this in I think 2 videos already. I mentioned it in a reaction video, and then if you've watched on Wyatt's channel the day in my life video, I also talked about it there. What is going on over here is I am propagating one of my succulents. I bought this Echeveria around the same time as I bought the green spiky guy in the front hall. So both of them are quite old, coming up on a year now. I've had them for a while. And what happened with this guy was, because there's not that much sun in Canada, especially through the winter, even though it's supposed to grow wide like this, in short, it actually ended up growing very, very tall, and it got all stretched out and elongated. And again, I'll put a picture on the screen for you so you can see what I'm talking about of how it's supposed to look versus how mine did look. And basically what happens is it just is always constantly reaching for the light. It's trying so hard to get more light, so it's just reaching and reaching and reaching, and then it gets stretched out and it got super tall. And the only way to save it was to actually basically chop its head off, remove its leaves, and turn all the leaves into a new plant. Every single one of these was a leaf off of the original plant that I removed, and now they're all growing new baby plants, which this is the farthest along it's been since I've talked about it in videos. So you can see literally like a new baby plant is coming on the end of each one, and the little hot pink sort of stick things coming off are the roots. It's super cool. This is I think about 2 to 3 weeks since I first removed them from the original plant, and so they're starting to grow little babies, and once they get to a more substantial size, I can basically remove the quote mother leaf, which is this thing, and leave nothing but the baby plant behind and plant each baby plant into its own little pot. So I have 5 in this dish, 4 in this dish over here, plus this little experimental one because I read that you could also kind of do this. The leaf itself hasn't rotted, so it might work, but I don't know what it's doing under there. I'm just kind of waiting to find out what's going on with that thing. So I don't know. Minimum, we're gonna have 9 baby plants. And this right here is the head of the original plant. I chopped off the head, I put it in some dirt in a pot, and this, because it's getting so much light from this hydroponic system, hopefully should go nice and wide and not tall the way that it had been before. Alright you guys, so that is all of the plants in our house as of now. I hope that you enjoyed this little tour. It's just something that I'm really passionate about ever since I've developed this hobby. I love, love, love talking about plants and collecting plants, obviously. So I'm happy to get to share it with all you guys. And let me know down in the comments below if you're into plants, what your favorite plants are, and also which of mine did you like the most. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. You can find my website, my social media, all that stuff in the description below. And with all of that said, I will see you next time.